Hello, I'm Mark Price. I'd like to talk to you today about the Feast of the Holy Family, Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. The title for my message today is Yes is Just the Beginning. But first, there were these two boys who were bothering everyone at church one day, and the pastor said, I want to see them in my office. So they were both brought to the pastor's office. One was sat outside and one was told to go in and see the pastor one-on-one. And the pastor starts to talk to him and asks the boy, says, where is God? And the boy looks at him puzzled, and the pastor said again, where is God? And the boy looked at him and said, well, I don't know. And the pastor louder says, where is God? And the boy gets up and he runs out, grabs his friend, and he says, we better get out of here. God is missing and they think we got him. So there you go. The gospel today is about Jesus going missing, so I thought it might tie in a little bit. The title, as I said, for my message is Yes is Just the Beginning. When we think about the Holy Family, we think about Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, all of them called by God in their own way. Jesus called by God in heaven, saying, I'm sending you to earth, my only begotten Son, out of love, so that you could be a sacrifice to bring people back to me, so you could teach them, help them to understand what they need to do so that they can spend life eternally with us here in heaven. And then Mary was called by God to bring Jesus into the world, to bring love into the world. And Mary said yes to God. Jesus, of course, said yes to God. And then Joseph was called to be the father, the earthly father of Jesus, to raise Jesus, to teach him, to guide him, to let him know and understand what it is to be a man here on this earth. So each of these three, Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, each of them said yes to God. But as I said, yes is just the beginning. Because once we say yes to God, we have to follow through with that yes. No matter how tough it gets, how bad it gets, how uncomfortable it gets. Saying yes is just the beginning. I remember Bishop Fulton Sheen, somebody who is a hero to me in the faith. I'm in ministry in some part because of his teachings over the years. And I remember he used to teach using a chalkboard. And every time he would start his teaching, he would, at the top of the chalkboard, he would write JMJ, and then he would get into whatever his message was. And years ago when I was young, I wondered, what is he writing up there? And I came to know JMJ, Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. So each time before he started his teaching, the first thing he would think about was the Holy Family. And right at the top of his board, JMJ. They were at the top and they came first. That is sort of what we should do in our lives. Put the Holy Family first in our lives. When people get married in our world today, they make their own commitments. They make their vows and they say yes. They say, I do. But that is only the beginning. That yes in a marriage is only the beginning. Why are so many marriages ending in divorce? When I started in my ministry over 50 years ago, it was, I think, in California, maybe 50% ended in divorce, but the rest of the country was maybe 30%, 20% ended in divorce. Now it's over 50% nationwide. Something's going the wrong direction. When we are getting married and we are saying to the other person, I love you and I'm going to obey my vows to stay through thick and thin, rich and poor, sickness and health, I'm going to stick by you. I'm going to be there by your side. We're saying yes to them. But then when it gets tough, we go the other way. Did you know that most of the marriages that end in divorce have nothing to do with abuse or other bigger problems? It's just because one or the other decides this isn't what I thought it would be. This is tougher than I thought. He or she isn't the person I thought they were. I'm bored. I've grown in a different direction. There's 1,001 reasons why, after saying yes, they weren't willing to live out the commitment. You know, there's a difference between commitment and involvement. Somebody years ago said that the way you can look at it is when you think of a ham and egg breakfast. To bring you the ham and egg breakfast, the chicken bringing you the eggs was involved. But the ham, the pig, he was committed. So we in our life as people of faith have to be like the pig. We have to be people who are committed. Mary and Joseph and Jesus were committed. It wasn't easy for them. Look at all that Jesus went through in his life, and yet he stuck with the commitment he made to his Father. He said yes to his Father, and he kept doing the will of God no matter what. Mary was called. She said yes, and it was tough for her. This young girl, she was pregnant without a husband initially, and that is something that could bring about death in her environment at that time in her culture. And yet she was a person who made her commitment to God more important than any of the obstacles. And Joseph asked to be the father of a baby that wasn't his, to raise this baby, to shield Mary and to shield Jesus from anything the world would throw at them. He said yes. And when it got difficult, when it got tough, they had to go to Bethlehem to register. They did that. They had to have a baby without their friends around in a foreign place, Bethlehem. Then they learned from the wise men that King Herod wanted their son dead. So in the middle of the night, he had to take them out into Egypt, where they stayed for 3 years. Everything Joseph was called to do, he did. So he not only said yes, Mary not only said yes, Jesus not only said yes, but they did the will of God no matter how difficult it was. They were not just involved with their faith, but they were people who were committed to it. And that's how we become a holy family. Holy family, holy means set apart. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph were set apart. That made them holy. But we're called to set our own lives apart, our own family apart, to make our own families holy. And in today's readings, we have 3 steps to do that. The first reading from 1 Samuel, we learn to dedicate ourselves. We hear of Hannah, who is having at an older age a child. She names him Samuel. And she decides even before this baby is born, she's going to dedicate him to God. And that's what she does. Well, we're called to dedicate ourselves. God touched us before we were ever born and called us for one purpose, to proclaim the glory of his Son. And that's what we're called to do. And so we have to be people, if we're going to be a holy family, if we're going to allow our family to become holy, become set apart for God, we have to first, as we hear in the first reading today, dedicate ourselves and dedicate our families. The second from a reading, 1 John, tells us to have faith in Jesus and love one another. If we want to remain focused on God, we have to have faith in Jesus. The only way we get to heaven and understand what his sacrifice was is to have faith in him, to believe in him, and then to love one another, which Jesus says is the greatest commandment. Love God and love each other. And then in the gospel today, we hear that very famous story of at Passover time, Jesus is 12 years of age, and they go to Jerusalem for the festival, for the Passover. And then on the way back, they realize that they've lost Jesus. They don't have him. Now, I remember as a father being at a store one time. I don't remember, Costco, Walmart, big store. And I looked around and my daughter wasn't there. And any of you who are parents, you've experienced that, I'm sure. And your heart stops. I can't find my child. Where's my child? I'm looking everywhere for my child. Where is my child? I can't find. Now, I probably had only lost her for less than a minute, but it felt to me like an hour. And I was so frantic trying to find my daughter, hoping nothing happened to her. Can you imagine Mary and Joseph not having their child Jesus for 3 days? 3 days they're searching for him. And where do they find him? In the place they never expected to find him, but in the temple in Jerusalem. And then, of course, they were surprised that he was listening to and speaking to and teaching and being taught by the chief priests and the teachers and the scribes. So they found him where they didn't expect to find him. Did you ever hear that saying that, I lost something and it was in the last place I looked? Well, isn't that kind of a stupid saying? I mean, who finds what they're looking for and keeps looking? Of course it's in the last place you look. But anyway, they find Jesus where they don't expect to find him, and there he is. So the message from the gospel for us is to keep looking. When we think we've lost Jesus, when we think we're away from God, when we think we've drifted apart, just keep looking. Don't give up. God never gives up on us. So the way to be a holy family is to dedicate ourselves, from the first reading, to have faith in Jesus and to love one another, and then to keep looking. Keep looking. God is always there for us. He wants us to look for him, and he will be there for us at all times. I thought it might be nice to hear from my friend St. Joseph, and he will tell you in his own words what it was like to go to Jerusalem when Jesus was 12, and how he and Mary felt when they lost their son and then eventually found him. So here is St. Joseph in his own words.
At one point when Jesus was 12 years of age, we decided we were going to go on our annual journey to Passover into Jerusalem. Now, as I told you before, in my day you're a man at 13, yes? So we decided on this journey, he was 12, almost a man, we would tell him who he was. We would tell him of all the messengers that spoke to us. We would tell him of all the visions. We would tell him of all the peoples that came. We would tell him to the best of our ability who he was. This was very difficult for me, because I had to tell him that I was not his father. And I was frightened. So we made the journey to Jerusalem. Now, on the journey we told them of Mary's visions, of my visions, we told them of the shepherds, we told them of the peoples who came up, we told them everything we knew. And when we left Jerusalem, we were on our way back home to Nazareth. After 2 days, I realized that I was looking for Jesus and I had not seen him. So I went to Mary and I said, Mary, I would like to speak with Jesus. And she said, I'm sorry, I thought he was with you. You may not know that men and women, they travel in separate caravans. Did you know that? Yeah, they come together for meals. So I thought that Jesus was with Mary. Mary thought that Jesus was with me. And so we looked at each other. Neither of us had seen Jesus since we were in Jerusalem. So we went to our friends. We asked, did you see Jesus? And they said, no, we have not seen him since Jerusalem. So we were frightened. We said, what are we going to do? I said, let us retrace our steps. We will meet on the steps of the great temple. And that's what we did. We retraced our steps, and when we arrived there, we were both on the steps of the temple, and Mary said, I have not seen him. I said, I have not seen him. I said, let us go into the temple and pray to God for direction. And that's what we did. We went into the temple. Do you know what we saw? When we walked into the temple, we saw Jesus. He was sitting there. He was talking to the Pharisees, the scribes, to the teachers. He was talking to them. He was asking them questions. They were answering. They were asking him questions. He was answering. We were astounded. We ran up to him. We put our arms around him, and we said, oh, we have... And then Mary let him have it. Yes. She said, why would you do this? What do you think you're doing, leaving us like this? We were frightened. We did not know where you were. Why could you do this? And then Jesus looked at us and said this, but where else would you expect to find me but in my Father's house? Don't you see, it should have made sense to us. We just told him who he was. It should have made sense. It would take time for him to know, to understand who he was. Well, we took him, we went back to Nazareth. And as your book said, Jesus grew in age, he grew in faith, and he grew in wisdom. He grew well by the standards of men.
I hope you appreciated hearing St. Joseph tell the story himself from today's gospel. There you have it, St. Joseph in his own words, what it was like losing Jesus in the temple. So today we celebrate the Feast of the Holy Family. Let's remember that yes is just the beginning. After we say yes, then we have to understand that it's a commitment. We're not involved in our faith, we're committed to our faith. And the 3 ways we learn today to adhere to that is to first dedicate ourselves. We learn from 1 Samuel. And then in the second reading from 1 John, We learned that we should have faith in Jesus at all times and to love one another. And then from the gospel, no matter what, keep looking. Keep looking. God is there waiting for you. Amen? This is Mark Price. Thanks for listening.